Professor George, I think your mic is off.
I'm sorry. So I was muted. I'm sorry, right? There are so many webinars going on. It seems like I don't have experience on this, but I do. Okay, so again, I am Professor George Carneiro. I am the academic director of the One MBA program at FGV. And One MBA is an executive MBA program put together by FGV and 4 other schools, top schools in the world. So it's an honor for FGV to welcome everyone here. So let me say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We have 28 different nationalities of people who registered for this webinar. So we're really thankful that in the middle of so many webinars that call our attention, you chose this one. Let me introduce you briefly to our speaker, who will speak more about himself in a while. So Leon Diab is an entrepreneur, and he is the CEO of Brilhon Technologies, which is a German and Brazilian company involved in sustainable solutions, right? As he'll talk in more detail to you, right? And he is a graduate from Stanford University and has been an entrepreneur for his life. He has a very interesting personal history. Let me say that the opinions expressed here by me, by Leon, right, are our own opinions. They don't necessarily represent FGV's perspectives or views, right? And I have another disclaimer here that says that we have agreed to have our images recorded and showed on YouTube. So this webinar is being recorded on YouTube. Let me thank Internations, a community, a great community, worldwide community of people from all over the world. Internation has always been a partner to FGV and promoting our webinars. So thank you again, Lucia, right, and Ricardo from Internations for promoting one more webinar. Before I now pass it on to Leon, let me say that you will be able to interact. There is a link to the Slido, sli.do, Slido. In your reminder, you receive that link. You please write your questions there. At the end of the Leon's presentation, Eliane, who is the program manager of One MBA, will talk with Leon about those questions. Don't wait until the end. Type your questions, right, along the presentation so that we can really have a lively discussion and conversation later, okay? So, Leon, thank you very much for, honoring us with your speech here, right? And over to you.
Hello, everybody. Thanks, Professor George, for your very nice introduction. I thank everybody as well in your team at FGV. Can you hear me, guys? Because there's a problem with the voice. If you can hear me, I would love to hear a nod or something. Okay, so thanks again for introducing me, Professor George, and thanks for everybody at your team at FGV. I'm honored to be presenting before all of you guys here, your audience, everybody here. I hope to offer a little bit of relevant knowledge to you in this 1-hour webinar. For the sake of respecting your time, I prepared this agenda, so we will go through 3 main points. I'll tell you a little bit of a story of the history of mobility. After that, we'll talk a little bit about how do we see mobility in a post-COVID-19 world. And later on, I'll introduce my company to you guys, and at the end we will open 15 minutes for your questions. Okay, I will tell you a bit of a story about mobility, but before I do that, let me take you to a little bit to the past. This is a photo from New York City, Fifth Avenue in 1900. And there is one car in this picture. Anyone can see the car? In a notion of horses. Do you know how much of horse dung is that? It's about 100 million kilograms every day. That's an emission problem of its own, right? We use horses as our main transportation mean for thousands of years. Anyway, back to the car. Anyone could see the car? Here's the car. It's just one car in a street full of horses. And however, just 13 years later, essentially transportation flipped, and there was only one horse in the site of the same street. Anyone can see the horse? Here's the horse. This was over 100 years ago. As you know, technology is changing even more rapidly today. This is how rapidly disruption happens. 13 years, that's all it took. Just 13 years to flip the image totally to 99% 0.9 cars to horses. Had you invested in a horse barn in 1900, basically you lost all of your money, right? So what is technology disruption? Let's talk about disruption a little bit. At the time, the car was a disruptor, right? A disruption is essentially when there is a conversion of technologies that make something new, a product or a service, possible. And with that process, it can create new market, new jobs, new opportunities, and at the same time destroy or radically transform an existing industry. Disruption also changed taste and preferences. Now, we think of taste as of something that is consistent, right? But in fact, there are variables. So, but then what happened actually? What happened to all of those horses? We ate them. No, I did not. You didn't. But essentially, they went from being transportation to being food, right? And later on, pets started eating horses. Dogs, cats started eating horses' meat. So taste and preference do change. Okay, now let me take you a little bit forward to 1985, when then largest telecom company on the planet, AT&T, it's an American company, hired a consulting company, McKinsey, and they asked them one question. By the year 2000, give me a 15-year forecast for this new thing called the cell phone. So at the moment, back in the time, the cell phone was something new. Tell me, how many subscribers would we get if we invested in this new technology, this new market? McKinsey went off and did whatever they do and came back with this number: 900,000 subscribers. 900,000 subscribers. The reality was 109 million. 109 million. I mean, this is not a small mistake. That's a factor of 120 times, right? Okay. Really, who knew that the smartphone and internet were going to be such a big force? So is there any correlation between high technology disruption and energy, transportation, mobility? Yeah, it turns out that there is. But there is a question. Why do experts and insiders and mainstream media analysts constantly get this disruption wrong? Why they do get disruption wrong every single time? It's the experts who dismiss disruptive opportunities, really smart people like Bill Gates, as you see. I mean, he's made a bundle of money, right? How could he be wrong about the internet, about smartphone? How is that possible, right? But here's a question I keep asking myself. Why do smart people, smart organizations constantly fail to anticipate or lead technology disruption? Because it is a big of a deal, right? Because a lot of money is wasted not investing in disruption and instead investing in the old model, right? Okay, so how technology disruption works. Let me try to break it down for you. Can we anticipate it? Can we forecast more or less disruption to come? Let's look at some examples, and then I will walk you through mobility. One of the things that I look at is technology cost curves. What is a technology cost curve? Essentially, every single technology improves every year, improves capability and improves cost, both together, right? That's what we call the cost curve. So if you look at any computing, it improves 41% per year on a dollar basis, not just capability. So essentially, every 2 years, we can buy for the same dollar twice the computing capability. Data, storage, data image, all are the same, so on and so forth. But each one of them is improving at a different rate, which makes it difficult to keep up with all of them. Now, here is another element. I will come back at technology cost curve, but we also see a linear of projections. If you make a baseline and then you add a flat percentage over the next 20, 30 years, that's a linear projection, right? But there is no technology in history, in the entire history, and you can go back in history for 1,000 years. No technology in the entire history has been adapted linearly. They're either a bust or you adopt in an S curve. So what is an S curve? Now, what is an S curve? So they go seemingly slowly in the beginning. They're now going slowly, but when they are 1 to 2%, we do not notice them. And then suddenly, boom, they achieve a tipping point, a critical mass, and they explode. And then they slow down again when they go mainstream. So this is exactly how S-curve works. So think about the iPhone, for example. Again, smartphones came in 2007, I think, sorry, and they exploded. Apple turned into a $1 trillion company, and now the market is slowing down again. In the mainstream, the cost not in the mainstream, the cost not the phone, but the technology. So the cost itself goes down for not the cost of the phone. I'm not talking about the cost of the phone. The cost of the technology is going down exponentially, as you can see in the curve. Nevertheless, we are talking about mobility. Mobility is not a smartphone, right? Well, not really. Uber left, Tesla, and so on and so forth. That's another story, right? But can't mobility really get disrupted that quickly? Let's get back to the horses and the cars story and see how quickly that adaptation happened. So interestingly enough, we can find that it went from 0 to 95% in 20 years. So basically turning the entire streets or transportation reality from 0 to 95% in 20 years. But that is not that interesting. What is really interesting is that from the tipping point to about 80%, from the tipping point of 11 to 80%, which is when market slowed down at 80%, it only took 10 years. It happened only in 10 years. Now, this is more than 100 years ago. So this has happened more than 100 years ago. This happened while we built two brand new industries, the oil industry, the auto industry, while we built a brand new road infrastructure, and all of that happened, you know what, during the First World War. So the entire world was fighting a war, and yet the disruption happened in just 10 years. Remember this, 10 years. So anyone tells you a disruption cannot happen in 10 years is not looking at the evidence, right? Okay. Almost everything gets adopted as an S-curve. Look at these examples from some technologies in the past century. Look at the data from the 1900s until today. They're getting steeper, steeper, and steeper. So it took a couple of decades, then 1 decade, 10 years, 5 years, and now it's taking a couple of years. Later on, it's taking few months even to get adapted. But still, it's an S-curve, right? Now let's take a detour. Let's take a detour and go back to mainstream analysis. This is the EIA, it's the Environmental Impact Assessment. The projections for solar PV. PV is the photovoltaic for the solar generation. So this projection in the year 2000. The black line is reality, and those colored lines, they are projections. So every year, starting from 2000, they made a prediction in the year 2030. So this year 2030, by the way, it's a fancy year in the environmental and energy markets. So anyway, in the year 2030, this is what we think solar PVs is going to be. Every year solar photovoltaic grows by 40 to 50%, and then they go back again and say, oh, I'm going to move my line a little bit up, and here is what I think it's going to be in 2030. So every time they move the line up, but it stayed like a linear line, right? They keep moving up, and they haven't gotten a single projection in the ballpark of reality. All their projections are linear, as I say. And in some cases, they even show the adoption is going down. If you look at like the blue line is going down. That's amazing. Now, solar PV is the cheapest form of energy generation by far. They still think it's going to go down. I don't know. How is that possible? Okay. Now, back to mobility. In 2010, the AI prediction, again, they predicted there would be 118 vehicles, like really, I don't know how they come up with these numbers, sold in the year 2035. 118 cars, just 118 cars. I mean, seriously, Tesla was already a public company. How hard was it even to predict 1,000? 1,000, a couple of thousands. How hard was that? Anyway, like we can see in the example here, the projections are linear. They are mechanistic in the sense that they take one variable and they essentially extrapolate it. They do not take into account the society does not work and never has worked this way. Technology has never been adapted linearly, but as an S-curve, that is reality. That is indeed reality. So the conclusion is the mainstream analysis is about forecasting the past, not about forecasting the future. That's exactly what I think. Okay, so let's take a little bit of a look at business model innovation and disruption in this sense. Business model innovation is every bit as disruptive as technology. So not just technologies could be disrupted, but also business models. But business model innovation are enabled or made possible by the convergence of necessary technologies. So we only need to wait for some technologies to be available before we can innovate again in business models. For instance, Uber, Lyft, Didi, 99s, all of these are ride-hailing platforms, are on-demand transportation services. They did not exist a couple of, like 15 years ago. Uber started in 2009 in a little apartment in San Francisco. 7 years. Uber had more booking in the entire than the entire US taxi industry combined. That is disruption, right? So again, anyone who is telling you that disruption cannot happen in mobility in 7 years or 10 years is not looking at the evidence. That's for sure. 8 years after Uber got started, after the starting of Uber, 8 years later, Uber became as big as 20% of all vehicle miles traveled in the US. And in a lot of cities around the world, as San Francisco, New York, and São Paulo as well. Now, my question again, how do we go from 20 to 100%? Now, Uber is 20% of the miles traveled. How do we go to 100%? Is that possible at all? But again, that is a serious disruption. So all of these innovations were made possible by the smartphone. Remember the story of the Apple iPhone? And the cloud computer technology. So it's not a coincidence that Uber started in 2009, 2 years after the smartphone came out, right? So one thing makes the other possible. Starting a few years ago, a lot of folks stopped buying new cars because of ride hailing. So Uber also now is disrupting other industries, like the automotive industry. This is not a new. This is actually started a few years ago. Now, in 2020, we have reached a new peak of gasoline cars. Last year, 2019, China, India, Europe, and even the US were down in ICE car sales compared to the year before, to 2018. What is it? Is it a pill? No, I don't think so. The trend is clear. People are not buying new cars. People do not want to buy new cars. Essentially, no gasoline cars. So what are the key technologies that we at Brilhon Technologies following, and I personally follow? And I think they will disrupt everything, including mobility, over the next 10 to 15 years. Now, as you see, like AI, machine learning, robotics, solar batteries, radars, LiDARs, all kind of sensors, Internet of Things, and so on and so forth. These technologies, I believe, they will disrupt the majority of industries as we know today, including mobility. Now that we discussed how we thought of mobility early this year before the COVID-19 pandemic started, and how disruption was already happening, let's take a look and dive a little bit into the new reality after the pandemic, right? From far back as Athens plague in the year 430 BC, would change the tide of battle in Athens' war against Sparta, until the Spanish flu outbreak in the 1920s. Pandemic have always changed the life of societies and the realities of societies as well. In big cities, in big urban cities like São Paulo, we over-rely on public transport. This is a photo actually took in a peak hour in one of the biggest subway stations in São Paulo. And as you can see, this does not fit with the new reality, right? In this environment, post-COVID, we need to maintain social distancing, as everybody now knows. And over-reliance on public transport has pushed for a greater need than any time before to have new urban mobility solutions, right? Okay, before we talk about the solutions, why actually mobility is relevant? Why urban mobility is relevant to the pandemic? Well, first, we have an increasing urbanization. So by 2050, the world's urban population is expected to reach 66%. So 66% of the world population will be living in urbanized area, in urban big big urban area, and that will cause a lot of problems of mobility within these areas, right? We also have a problem of access to resources. Mobility is a main means for accessing jobs, markets, goods, social interactions, educations, and a full range of other services contributing to healthy and fulfilled lives. So basically, it's an essential service that we cannot give up, right? Inclusivity as well. So what do I mean by that? Affordable and well-designed mobility systems that include people or specific group of people, let's say, into society activities, like, I mean, especially women, disabled group of people, or people who live outside of big areas, or like the city centers. They need to be included in the action of the city, right? So this is also important for the future of society. Climate change innovation, and imperative as well. So cities are responsible for 70% of GHG, which is the greenhouse emissions, and 60% of the energy consumption. While transport is the largest energy consumption sector in 40% of the countries, and it comes second for the remaining ones. So this is a very important thing to look at. And last but not least, healthy, or like the health side of our society. Air and noise pollution are considered to be the types that affect the human the most, right? In 2016, 91% of the urban population worldwide where breathing air did not meet the WHO air quality, right? 91%. And in 2017, an estimated of 3 million deaths were provoked actually by air pollution. So it's really important to look at these things. Okay, how COVID actually 19 affected urban mobility? Let's look at like some of the new learnings that we actually learned during the pandemic. So we have noticed like financial stress on public transport system, essentially. On one side, we've seen that it has provoked high financial stress, right, on the whole facility, on the public transportation system. Passenger number dropped by 80 to 90%. So it has been quite dramatic for them, right? In terms of revenue, they receive less revenues, but they still have to operate. On the other hand, they've seen increase in cost. I mean, of course, they will still providing in many cities, big cities, the essential services combined with cost of cleaning and safety, additional cost still for the pandemic, and etc. So most of these operators are only surviving thanks to public subsidies, cash reserves that they might have, or cutting on other budgets. So that's not a nice situation to be, right? And some of them are really in a delicate situation, especially because we do not know when demand will be at pre-COVID levels back again, right? No one knows. But on a more positive note, we also have seen a significant increase in cycling. So the bicycle use, an extension of bicycle lanes in many cities. Like this is, I think, a photo taken in São Paulo. Many cities around the world have seen a significant increase in bicycles use and a promotion to non-motorized transport, not just bicycles. So São Paulo is not an exception. So it has been an exciting trend to observe worldwide during the COVID crisis. And maybe you notice now how many delivery boys are in the street, right, using bicycles and small or micro mobility solutions. Moreover, on the other hand, we have also seen the shared and micro mobility options, like the scooters or the bacinete, as they call it in São Paulo, have been having it a little difficult time, right? Since they were perceived as less safe. However, it's interesting to see how fast the food delivery industry is picking up on these opportunities and has been growing so fast. Therefore, adding a different type or a different portion of urban mobility activities to our streets. Shared mobility, the way we knew it before COVID, is declining in the use. Why? Because people are not feeling safe to touch something that somebody might have touched before them, and many other reasons. But this is like how COVID like dramatically changed the reality in our streets. Also, we all know that changing mobility patterns. So now we work from home. So the necessity to move is not as before. On the other hand, there has been much emergence of health-related transportation. So a lot of people are needing to go to hospitals, to clinics, and therefore they move more in the streets. So we need to see in terms of demand how this continues after a bit of time when the situation is more regularized. So all of that is a big change in mobility patterns, right? We also have seen that the startup ecosystem, especially in São Paulo, especially in Brazil, and especially the mobility startup ecosystem is suffering a lot. And many reports says that up to 80% of viable mobility startups might not survive COVID crisis, right? That's really so sad, but we have to deal with the reality. So that's a suffering startup ecosystem. So what do we conclude from all of that? So after seeing the development in the domain of urban mobility before and during COVID-19, I think that we have interesting time ahead, which policymakers will be making decisions that will most likely define the mobility of the following years to come. The decisions should take a holistic and systematic approach. So some of the pieces of the puzzles that have today in the mobility domain explored, and also the questions of how innovation can contribute to solving the most stressing problem when mobility is concerned. For instance, while EV are a much better and cleaner alternative to ICE cars, we will still need to consider when and how the energy that these electric vehicles consume is being generated, and whether it's clean or not, right? And with that being said, let me introduce you to our company, Brilhon Technology. Brilhon Technologies is a deep tech startup with about 2 years in existence. We are based today in São Paulo and Berlin. We decided to put most of our attention here in Brazil, where I see personally many opportunities and sadly not so much innovation rising to the country's challenges. But we at Brilhon are very optimistic. We at Brilhon co-created digital and physical solutions with our local and international partners. So I'll show you like in a brief what has been happening the last 2 years. So we started, actually the concept was actually designed and found in Germany, but we established the company in 2018. That's a mistake actually in the slide. In 2018, late 2018, and down the road we were able to close a lot of deals, a lot of partnerships. We are using methods and new technologies to accelerate the adoption of electric cars and smart mobility, and to bridge the gap of autonomous vehicle future. We aim to provoke low-cost, smart, and safe transport solution for the masses and increase the economic value of the vehicles of the community. How are we planning to do that? So we do a lot of ecosystem engineering, which means bringing all mobility ecosystem players together to understand their technologies, to understand their challenges together, and tackle them all together in one force in collaborative approach, right? So as you look here, like essentially before the crisis, Brilhon was as an integrated solution, a network of fast charging stations that are connected via a mobile app and web services. And this mobile app is accessible by many partners, by many potential players in the market. So these are like rather examples, not necessarily reflecting the reality at the moment, but it could be used by the electric car dealers, so they could sell the access to our network charging stations to their customers who buy or who wish to buy electric cars. On the other hand, our main partner actually in this whole project is Uber. In this case, that the Uber drivers are like supposed to drive an electric car in the future and are able to charge their cars at our stations. So, and this goes to public fleets, police, and civil guards, ambulance, corporate fleets, and so on and so forth. So all of these opportunities that we could spot in the past, even before the COVID, they have a lot of impacts. So impacts that we can see easily deliverable: less congestions, less emissions, reduce the government footprint of CO2, and so on and so forth, and even boost the sales of electric cars. So after the COVID, we started to think about a new ideas, so then we can rise to the challenges as we saw earlier in this presentation. We work hard so that our new shared transport platform, now we are designing a new transport platform, could be utilized around the clock, shared amongst different industries and audiences, as you could see in the slide, the previous slide, which can relieve the burden of financial stress from the government and from the public. Because then they do not really need to invest heavily in participating in building this ecosystem. Our integrated solution that includes software and new vehicle platform will be utilized across different industries, considering time and energy optimization. That's a very important thing. That cost of ownership becomes so low that everyone can use it. Everyone can use it, not buy it. So this is really important. I will explain later. Which brings extra value to the user and also to the city as a whole. We are developing data-driven models and simulations of road transport covering the movement of people, products, and services. It's important to pay some attention to all kinds of transport. So transport is not just like passenger transport. You have different kinds of transport. For example, freight or goods movement in cities are not easy to plan for sometimes overlooked. They're most of the time overlooked. Freight vehicles may make up a small fraction of the total road vehicle fleet, but they actually contribute more towards the total vehicle kilometer traveled. So they're small in numbers, but they move a lot, and therefore they create different kind of problems, and also are responsible for higher on-air emissions. So, and this proportionally, this happens like with a much bigger proportion comparing to their size. So in recent months, we've done quite a bit examining last mile logistics solutions and trying to come up with ways to reduce the negative impact of freight transport. Thanks a lot for listening to me. That's unfortunately the time is not enough to say everything, but we hopefully gonna be presenting different ideas in the future and like to follow up all of this presentation in new opportunities. I'm really ready to take your questions, and thanks a lot again, Professor George and everybody at FGV. Very much appreciated.
John, thank you very much. Great presentation. We'll have a discussion now, and Eliane will be reading the questions and interacting. Thank you very much, Eliane, One MBA Program Manager.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So we have here a few questions for Leon. So Leon, in a city like São Paulo, big with long distance between places and security issues, how do you see the urban mobility will improve in the next years?
Nice. That's really a very nice question. So I think we at Brilhon Technologies believing so much in shared mobility in the sense, not in the sense like of people using the same vehicle at the same time, not necessarily, but using the same vehicle at different times during the day. And the companies or the fleet managers of these vehicles will be taking care of the whole safety and logistics behind all the transportation solution. And I think at some point in the future, like people will even share mobility with goods and maybe even food delivery and different kind of products on the same platform. So therefore we have less vehicles in the street, and therefore we have less congestion problems. And then the transport solution will become even much cheaper and affordable to a bigger amount of people.
Thank you. That was the question from Ana Maria Gomes. Now we have a second question from an anonymous watcher. Are electric cars going to be a reality in Brazil in the upcoming years?
Yes, indeed. So I'm taking a bet on that, actually. So many people do not believe in that. Many people, unfortunately, look at Brazil as a little bit delayed in terms of adapting to new technologies, but I actually do not see it this way. I think Brazil is a big market, and I honestly think it has a great potential, and I could see in the coming few years, maybe 5 years, that electric cars are actually a new reality in São Paulo, mainly in São Paulo, and we are working so hard to make this happen with the help of our partners, with the help of our community here in São Paulo and Germany. And I think one of the good factors that I could see helping this adaptation, as we discussed in the presentation earlier, that Brazil is considered one of the countries that has the cleanest energy on the planet. So 80% of the Brazilian energy is actually clean. So that makes it even easier to and faster to adapt to new technologies. However, the prices are a little bit high still, out of the approach of the biggest segment of the society. But that's what we think about. So people will not even need to buy cars. I think they will only share cars in the future. So the cars of the future, they will not be owned by households, as I think, but I think they will be actually shared among a wider group of people, goods, and other different kind of services. So yes, for your short answer, yes, I think it's going to be a new reality. Yeah.
Yes, taking a ride on that question. If you could foresee the future, in how long there will be no more cars powered by gas?
Say that again.
If you could foresee the future, like in your opinion, how long there will be until we don't have any more cars powered by gas?
It's really hard to say. Like, I mean, no one has a crystal ball, right? So you cannot tell like precisely 5, 10 years, but I believe like in the coming 2 decades, where this whole market will be entirely disrupted. So we might still see some cars in 10, 20 years, but they will be like a small portion of the reality compared to the new reality, actually.
And I have here one last question from a viewer. What is the extent of government influence in making urban mobility safer, more efficient, and environmental friendly?
That's actually a brilliant question. I was waiting for this one. So I think the public sector is always responsible to provoking the movement and to somehow supporting it when it needs support. I do not believe in an ecosystem where the government does everything, but I also believe in an ecosystem where the government paves the road for startups, for government, for like organizations, researchers, students, all kind of organizations that are concerned about this type of problems. So the government has to maybe lower a little bit the level of bureaucracy ahead of starting these kind of projects. And I think it's already taking that kind of steps forward. We have in Brazil today something called Rota 2030. It's the roadmap to the year 2030. And I'm seeing that the government is maybe a little bit slower than expected or like wished for, but at least it's taking some moves. And I'm sure in the coming future, when the technology is more available and of reach for a wider or a broader segment of people, the government will give much attention.
Great, thank you. So 2 more questions came up as the last one. So what keeps car hailing services such as Uber from adopting electric cars massively?
That's a good question. So the problem with Uber business model does not really is not concerned about cars. So Uber does not really worry who brings the car to the whole supply chain. Therefore, they do not pay enough attention to that. However, they are actually doing a lot of effort to help us change this reality. And I totally understand, like a big company like Uber is not supposed to readapt to a new business model and abandon the old one. So as you know, Uber started as like Airbnb. They do not own the car. They do not own the platform. And on the other hand, the electric car prices in Brazil are extremely high. So if you want to actually buy a reasonable electric car, it starts from 150,000 reais. That's actually before the crisis. So you really need to have a lot of money to buy electric car, and then it doesn't make sense to work for Uber if you have that kind of money. So that's a reality, and that's why we think of solving this kind of problem by giving the community access to electric cars instead of forcing them to buy the car. So this is actually what we do at Brilhon. This is the core of our business. We don't believe in economy where people have to buy the vehicles because most of the time we leave the car parked or like garage, right? We don't use it. We use the car 5% of the time. The rest of the time we pay taxes, we pay all kind of cost, but the car is actually stock, depreciating asset. So this is what we do not believe, we do not promote. And on the other hand, when the car is driving most of the time, serving up to 30 different passengers per day, maybe even delivering some products, some e-commerce products along the way, that makes a lot of sense. And then the business model or the economics value of the whole vehicle is much better, right? Did that answer the question?
Yes, it does. Thank you. Do you have time for a couple more questions?
Sure, yeah.
Yes, thank you. So an anonymous viewer asked, what about solar energy and wind energy? Very expensive for poor communities, no?
I'm not sure I got the question, but you know, there is an overlapping between electric cars and energy as a holistic view. When it comes to wind and solar, it's like actually it's a booming industry in Brazil, and I think it's catching up with bigger markets in the world like China and the US and even Europe. I think at some point in the future, like there will be like a marriage between the EV industry and the photovoltaic and the clean energy as a holistic view industries. But this is like, I think this is needs a lot of challenges to be overcame before we can hit that milestone. But we do a lot of research in Brilhon Technologies to keep an eye on the advancement and the development happening on that side of the spectrum. So I didn't really get the question, was not really clear, but I hope that answered enough whoever was asking.
Yes. So next question, it's about the company actually. What's Brilhon's fleet planning strategies for commercial vehicles? So if you have like, yeah, what is Brilhon's fleet planning strategies for commercial vehicles, and how automakers see companies like Brilhon in the marketing?
Okay, so honestly, and we could take a hint from the presentation I gave earlier. Typically, disruption does not come from within the mainstream companies. Unfortunately, that does not happen. So neither Google nor Apple, when the whole smartphone movement started, were like actually existing in the smartphone industry. It was Nokia, you remember it, was BlackBerry, was Samsung. These guys didn't do anything. They could have done it, but they didn't. Why? It just, unfortunately, that's the nature of organizations. They don't do that. They are not agile enough to take these kind of moves. And therefore, I believe that the automotive industry is undergoing a big dramatic changes in the coming few years. We've already seen that happening with Tesla, battling with Volkswagen, Nissan, and big companies in the US and even in Europe. Now Tesla is actually building a new mega factory in Berlin, or like in Germany, a little bit outside of Berlin. And this shows a new reality. Like it's the home of the biggest car makers on the planet, Germany, right? And Tesla is going there, and Tesla is only like 15 to 17-year-old company. It was a startup like 20 years ago, less than 20 years ago. So we've been having a lot of conversations. We have some partnerships with automakers here in Brazil and in Germany. But to be honest with you, they are not taking us as seriously as we hope for. But that's just the process. I mean, everything starts small until it disrupts something later on down the road. Now in Brazil, I think they are still trying to sell cars. They're still trying to sell electric cars. So as I told you, the electric car price starts from 100,050, and they still try to sell cars. And for me, I don't see that happening. They might be able to send a couple of hundred of cars per year, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, but that's not a market. So that doesn't really do a dent in the whole market reality. So soon enough, they will realize that sharing mobility and new philosophy in transportation and mobility will be the new reality. And therefore, they either be able to catch up fast and save the day, or they will just disappear as other big companies disappear, right?
Right, great. Thank you very much, Leon, for your time and for answering the questions. There's one last question. It's like, do you own a car? And is your company hiring? What are you looking for? Can you give us some information on that?
Fantastic. So at the moment, we have a hybrid like business model. We do not entirely own the car. We try to lease the car from different kind of investors. And even in the future, we are planning investing plans where actually the community, the passenger himself, because by the end of the day, who pays for this whole business model is the passenger. If you do not use the car, if you do not want to move from A to B, the whole business do not exist. Uber does not exist. We do not exist. So therefore, it makes a lot of sense for the passenger to perhaps become a micro investor and finance one portion of our car, or like maybe a whole car, or maybe a small fleet of cars if he wants to be a little bit bigger of an investor. But at the moment, we work with third-party investors. They finance our cars, but we take care of the fleet management, and we take care of the technology development, and everything happens behind the scene that makes the whole solution possible for the Uber driver and also for the passenger. And we have a little bit of courageous plans to actually design a car. We already started thinking of designing a car. We assembled a team in Germany and also in Brazil there that do a lot of research and development in terms of understanding the need, the necessity, because design starts from understanding the necessity of the market, so that we can actually rethink the car. Because the car we're using today was not actually designed for this model, was designed for sales, for car sales. And this doesn't really fit, but we need to adapt. So I believe in the coming maybe 5 to 6 years, we will perhaps be able to introduce our philosophy in a physical product, in a new platform that supply every single need in a very optimized way to this industry. And speaking of hiring, we have an internship program now, and that's actually what justifies this relationship with FGV, that we are trying to build a community where we encourage people and new entrepreneurs and new graduates to think a little bit bigger, to try to pursue different kind of careers, different kind of opportunities, perhaps outside of the mainstream companies that they do not maybe innovate enough today. So I hope that this will not be the last webinar. We will be making other webinars down the road, so that we inspire more people and get in touch with more people and maybe find the talents that we're looking for, because we are now trying to solve a big problem, which definitely need a lot of people to work, a lot of people to help. We are doing this in Germany already. We have a good network of academics, talents, professionals, and even students in Germany. And we are in the process to do so also here in Brazil. So now during the COVID, we do not hire at the moment, but we definitely foresee good opportunities and plans for the coming future, maybe early next year, to look for like the best talents in the market, and hopefully FGV will be able to help us with that.
We certainly will. Thank you very much. Now Thanks. It's my last question. Do you own a car?
Do
you own your own car? Yes.
No, I do not have a car. Yeah, that's a tricky question.
Nice. Okay, very good.
I had a car.
Yes, no.
I had a car until I started the company, and then I sold the car. And today I use Uber, or if I need a car actually for like long distances, I always advise to use rental cars, because they're just cheap, accessible, and easy. You use it 2 days, and when you don't need it, you don't keep it occupied or unoccupied, but still utilized. So that's how we believe, yes. And this is the reality we are promoting.
That's very good. Thank you very much, Leon. I pass the word to Professor George to close the seminar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eliane, for leading the question and answer part. Leon, great having you here. Right, very inspiring. Right, let's think about the future. Let's see how disruptive life will make Right, and let's see, maybe even electric cars will have the S curve. They may not even reach that top, right? They may just stop midway through because of changing mobility patterns. Okay, thank you very much once again, and let me thank you again, the Internations community. As I told you in the beginning, Internations is a lively community of expatriates and the locals, right? And that's where we met, Leon, first, right? So please, if you don't know Internations, come. During the pandemic, they're hosting or promoting a lot of virtual meetings, right, and activities. It's a great opportunity to meet people. And FGV is engaging in this, let's say, campaign, right? We need to meet people from everywhere. We're still a global world, right? The pandemic may change travel patterns, but it will not change people from knowing one another from other parts of the world. So International is a great opportunity to meet new people, get new ideas, inspiration, and so on. Thank you very much to the audience for honoring us with your attendance. Thank you very much, Leon. Let's be in touch.
Thank you,
and work
Professor George.
together.
Thanks for the
Thank
community.
you.
Thanks for everybody for having me here. I hope that we will repeat it once again soon.
Thank you.